Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Thank you very much for joining us on our virtual Visit My Mosque Day. Unfortunately, we can't have a real Visit My Mosque Day because of the coronavirus pandemic, and we can't have people coming to our center because the mosque is unfortunately still closed. But what we're trying to do today is still give you the opportunity of seeing the site, seeing more about what we do, and virtually visiting our mosque and understanding the types of activities that we try and have at our center in normal times. So that's what we're going to try and do today. The agenda for the day is quite simple. So what we're going to do on the next slide is we've got obviously different social media, which you can always follow us and keep in touch with us through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, or come to our website. And just feel free to email us at info@sikkim.org.uk. And obviously, if you do have any questions at the end, we have some time for Q&A on the Zoom call at the end of the day today. If you go to the next slide, our agenda for today is quite simple. We're going to have some recitation of the Quran. The Quran is really important as the holy book of Muslims, very similar to the Bible in Christianity. And it'll give you an overview of some of the important themes that we think are really important in Islam. We'll then have a short presentation about the center, what we do, how we try and engage with our communities across the area, and how we engage internationally as well. And then we'll try and give you a bit of information about what we do, what we've been doing during the coronavirus pandemic, because the mosque is closed and we've suspended all services after, actually even before the government asked us to, but we thought it was very important that we recognize the risk to our communities and the wider society. So we actually closed our doors before the government even asked, and we still, unfortunately, are still keeping our doors closed. We don't want mass gatherings to lead to a situation where the virus will spread even further. So we're trying our best to listen to what the government says, what the experts are saying, and that's our goal in this period. And we'll talk about what we're doing in the interim. How have we kept our functions going during this period? And then we'll have a tour of the Salam Center site. So you may not be aware, but we are trying to build a brand new center at this very site, and we thought it would be good to give you a tour, and that's what we will do at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mariam Asaria, who is a member of the executive committee, and she will recite some verses of the Quran. There is a translation on the screen, which you'll be able to see. And again, if you have any questions about these verses or about the themes that it brings up, please feel free to put them on the Zoom chat or as we go along, or feel free to ask us at the end of the day. Thank you very much. Mariam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأوفوا بعهد الله إذا عاهدتم ولا تنقضوا الأيمان بعد توكيدها وقد جعلتم الله عليكم كفيلا إن الله يعلم ما تفعلون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for that beautiful recitation. As you saw, there were different themes that were talked about, how you should try and, if there's a fight between different people, how you can try and resolve it peacefully, talking very much about the different ideas of racism and different topics about justice and some of the very important themes in the Quran. You'll see that we use different verses from different areas because we want to bring those themes up because those are really important themes that matter to us here in this community. What I'd like to talk about now is a bit about the center here, and I'll do that through the next few slides. I'm one of the members of the executive committee. My name is Miqdad Versi, and my colleague Mariam Asaria will talk about some of the things that we've been doing during the coronavirus pandemic afterwards. So if you go to the next slide, what we try and do during all of our work is be as holistic in the way that we look at our community. We've thought very hard about what our community needs are and what we can do both internally within our community and for the wider society. So within our community itself, we have a set of core programs, and those are things that happen every Friday evening, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail, where we talk about things that matter to us about our faith and whether that's academic talks or whether that is, talks by lecturers who will explain different important personalities within our history and all of our past. We have different conferences that we hold. Every Thursday we have a recitation of Dua Kumail, which is a supplication to God, which talks about how we should try and think about God in different ways and see how we can seek from Him His forgiveness for all the different challenges that we face in this world. We have different tafsir, so that's a commentary on the Quran. So you heard a bit of the Quran. What there are is, many people, many scholars talk about the Quran in a lot of depth. You might just see one verse which says one thing which seems quite simple. But when you see how that verse interacts with other verses in the Quran, that becomes really interesting. And so we have scholars who come and talk to us about that and how those verses in a certain time might be understood in today's day, where people might have different views and how those different views can be reconciled together. So we have scholars who come and talk about that. We also have sports, we have yoga, we have the youth committee who come and talk and do events for young children. And two major events throughout the year. One is Ramadan, which has just passed recently. And that's where, obviously, as many of you will be aware, that we fast from dawn in the morning till sunset. And during that period and during that month, Muslims generally come together. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, you weren't able to, and you'll hear more about that later. But in the evenings, we have a lot of different programs to try and bring people together in different ways through food and also through the various supplications to God that we do. And although this year many of you weren't able to attend, every year we normally have an interfaith iftar where people come from around the communities, and that's really part of what we try and do in terms of working with others. We try very hard in terms of working with our brothers and sisters in Islam, in terms of our other Muslim and Shia groups and other Sunni groups, all in this area, through things like the Muslim Forum of Middlesex. We also partner with other organizations, and we also partner with people who aren't Muslim, whether that's through Harrow Citizens, or whether it is through our local church, which we go to and regularly attend. So for example, St. Albans Church, which is just down the road. We try and visit at least once a year for midnight mass. About 50 of us, between 30 and 50 of us go every year. And that's something that we find really, really quite important to us. And it's something that we've been working very closely with them for a very long time. And, we find it really important to engage. And at the same time, before the pandemic started, we used to meet every couple of months to discuss some verses of the Bible, some verses of the Quran, because this is how we want to engage with our society around us. And so those are the types of activities that we do as a whole. And we try and also, do lots of charity. We try and be green. We ensure issues to do with mental health we can deal with in different ways. We try and work on issues to do with homelessness. Now, we're a small community. We can't do everything, and we don't do everything as well as we could do. And we always try and improve ourselves, but we have a long way to go, and hopefully this is part of our journey to get better. Go to the next slide. One of the key things that we try and do is bring really, really quite interesting, different people from around the globe to come here. And these are just some of the examples of people who we brought from, as you can see where the dots are, across the globe. If you go to the next slide, we also bring people in who cover really difficult topics, whether that's to do with different foreign affairs issues, or whether it's to do with academic issues here in the country. If you go to the next slide, we also have people who are really well regarded here in the UK. And if you go to the next slide, those are, a lot of these people are academics in this country. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this would also include people from the media and politicians. If you go to the next slide, we'll have human rights activists who come, and in the next slide, we have religious leaders who come. So it's what we try and do is really quite a diverse group. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we also do conferences as well on different topics by different experts who come. Now, if you go to the next slide, what you will see is that, especially in more recent times, we've tried to make sure that the topics and the people who come are really diverse. If you see the type of people from Siddiqa Kurji, Sarah Manusek, Bobby Duffy, Catherine Schofield, whoever they are, each of these people are really quite leaders in their fields in what they're doing. Whether it's their experience, whether it's the topic that they're talking about, you'll see that these people, Natasha Cole, she is very good on Kashmir, for example. Professor Jerry Broughton, who's fantastic, he's come on lots of topics. And this latest post, so this is where we are currently. We had Laura Mora talk to us about hijab, fashion, empowerment, and Islamophobia. We have, in a couple of weeks' time, we have Sheikh Noor, who will be speaking to us about an important personality in our history, the 8th Imam within the Shia community. And we have Islam and Slavery talking to us by Professor Clarence Smith. So what we try and do is cover a range of different topics from different experts. And you can see from these last few posters the type of people who we try and bring in. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see that these lectures are really part of a journey that we've taken. We as a community started in the 70s, although I wasn't even born then, but the community started in the 70s, and before I was born, these Friday programs that we've been talking about started. And, this was a community that primarily came from abroad. The majority of the people had been born abroad during this period. And you had people from an East African Asian background, people from Bahrain, from Iraq, from Iran, and Lebanon, all coming together from a very early stage. And there were a lot of different things that we started. And in the sort of mid-80s, a decision was made that all our programs would have to have an English element and has to be in English, because we had people from all these different backgrounds. And you couldn't have a main talk and a session which wasn't in English if you wanted to be inclusive of everyone. And quite early on we ensured that we had both genders in our executive committee, and we want to have young people in our executive committee, and that started on, again, very early, because the community recognized that these were very important things that we should have done from as early as possible. And slowly, we started opening up more and engaged far more with the wider society. And it's now been about 11 or 12 years, for example, since we've had a relationship with our local church, and we've been going to the center all the time. And we've been trying to have all these different, more innovative types of debates and discussions on different topics. And that's what we're trying to do, try and be innovative and grow as much as we can. So it's been a process. And I think that process has been a learning for us and as a community. And hopefully we've been able to engage much better with the wider society. Go to the next slide. And that's where you'll see right now we've been engaged far more, whether it is with the Harrow Community Partnership, which actually doesn't do that much nowadays. I talked a little bit about the grassroots interfaith partnership we have with the local churches, where we discuss the Bible and the Quran. West London Church's homeless concern, where we have historically been working with them in terms of our volunteers and helping and supporting them. The Interfaith Iftar, which I mentioned as well, and the Midnight Mass, which we go, and the fourth year, it's been now almost 10 years. It's been 11 years, I think, since we've gone there. And every Christmas we try and do different things. And we also try and build genuine partnerships in different organizations, whether it is with St. Albans Church, which we talked about, or whether it is with some of these other communities where we've had events together in some way, or we've worked together in some way in different, or attended events of the Three Faith Forum, for example. And we try and work together where we can. For example, in the Muslim Forum of Middlesex, the local mosques in the area, it's very important that we learn from one another, and we work together as mosques on issues that matter to us. And we have got together on a number of different things. We've had a joint intrafaith unity event a couple of years ago, and we try and support each other's interests and share one another's facilities. Harrow Mosque, for example, used our site over here for 13 years, and it shows, when a local mosque can use our facilities because they were rebuilding, this is how we can work together as communities, and it's all about working together for the common good. And you'll see that because we were working for so long with the local Sunni community, we're from a Shia background, and the Harrow Mosque is from a Sunni background, but we work very closely together. And here are some of the quotes that have happened from some of the people, and the reflections of some of the people from Harrow Mosque about what we've been doing at our centre. So it shows that we want to work together very much, and we don't just want to work internally. What we also try and do is support others. That's really important. And we've been supporting a range of different projects. Here are just some examples of the different projects that we've been supporting with that sort of central vision of being inclusive and being proud of who we are, but inclusive of everyone as much as possible. And you can see the range of different organizations we've been trying to support. And you go to the next slide, you'll see that we also support lots of appeals. And I'm talking about, literally tens of thousands of pounds going to all of these different appeals across the globe to help those who are very vulnerable and struggling. And we've also been helping other mosques develop their own capital building projects, whether it is in the UK or internationally, because we think it's really important that, we can build these different centers because they can become a beacon to help spread justice wherever we are. And that's both locally and a little bit internationally as well. And our goal is to really move towards the Salam Center, which is what we're trying to build and develop, because of our general principle, which is this idea that people are one of two types, either your brother or sister in faith, or your equals in humanity. And so those ideas of really trying to be equal and working for one another are really central for what we're doing. But before we go into anything more on the Salam Center, I'd like to welcome Mariam Asaraya, who's another member of the Executive Committee, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the work that we've been doing during this pandemic, through the last few months. We've been trying to help others in different ways, through different food parcels, etc. And Mariam's going to be able to talk about that. And then she'll introduce a little bit about the Salam Center before we get to go on the virtual tour. So without further ado, Mariam.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Thank you so much for everyone joining us today. Though we may not have been able to physically come together as a community due to coronavirus, this virus has really ignited the community spirit within people. People across the country, Muslim and non-Muslim, have really come together during this pandemic and have shown willingness to help the vulnerable across the country. Whether it be through setting up local community groups, helping in food banks, speaking to those that may have been isolated from this pandemic, community spirit is really all around us. And it's this spirit which Islam instills within us, caring for our neighbors, helping those that are poor and vulnerable, and it's been amazing to see it everywhere. In these unprecedented times, and for the first time in Sikkim's history, we've been unable to have our programs at our centre. As a community centre, we were faced with a huge task to try and maintain the emotional, spiritual, and community connection that we all feel at our centre while we socially isolate at home. For Muslims, one of the most important months of the year, Ramadan, was spent in the midst of this pandemic. Unfortunately, we were unable to physically come together on a daily basis, but thankfully, due to technology, we've been able to stream most of our programs online. During Ramadan, we usually fundraise to run our programs. This year, however, we took a decision to support those who are most in need, both at home and abroad. Through our Ramadan appeal, we partnered with Sufra and the Lady Fatima Trust with an aim to raise just under £30,000. This meant that we, as a community, have given approximately 2,000 meals to those in need in Brent, as well as 250 Eid presents to children living in poverty. We've also contributed to food banks in Luton and the Imam Hussein Foundation. Through the Lady Fatima Trust, we have raised money to provide hundreds of food parcels abroad in places like Yemen, India, Iraq, and Palestine. We've also supported the Mothernomics project, which will transform the lives of widowed women by enabling them to start their own businesses in Iraq and Palestine. We're extremely excited for a future free of coronavirus and in a new centre with all the facilities our community deserves, not just the Muslim community, but for all of us in Harrow. A centre truly needed for today's times, where people from different walks of life will come together as a community, eat together, socialise together, and really get to know one another through community activities. And this community spirit must be maintained after this pandemic, and we must make every effort to understand our neighbours. So I think we're now going to move to the Salam Centre and actually take a tour of the site as it is right now.
Okay, we're now going to go for a tour of the Salam Centre site, so let's go. Obviously, we are trying to keep social distancing, so everyone will be a couple of meters apart. My shoes on. Please come through. And you'll see that we are a fair trade mosque, which we do have there. We have, and you can see a couple of the different posters out here, one of which is on the coronavirus and just making sure that we can protect ourselves against it. But let's go ahead. The site, as you can see, does feel like a building site. Let's just go to the front, where you can see a couple of posters there. What you can see here is this is our banner, because obviously we want to thank everybody who's been fighting against coronavirus. This is something that impacts all of us, and we think it's really important to thank those who have been working and fighting this on our behalf, in the NHS and in the care sector generally. Key workers, of course. Key workers are very important in this. We're going to put the crossbow in. Sorry, we have a code here to so we can let people through. Okay, so this is the site of the Salam Centre. This is what we're going to have. Hopefully, it's about nearly an acre in size. It really is something quite ambitious that we're trying to do here. It's not something that many organisations have been able to do, and this is a £20 million project. We've got halfway there, but we do need another £10 million to sort of 10 to 12 million pounds to finish this. But what you can see, and what we'll try and show you through this next few minutes, is the scale of what we're trying to do, but also the real vision that we have here. Because what we want to do is really change the way we think about mosques. Let's come through and start in the middle, and we'll show you more about this. So I'm putting the lights on here, which should mean that we will be able to go down and see them. Yeah, perfect. All right. Now, obviously, as you can see, it's been raining the last couple of days, so you'll be able to see some water on the floor. The actual site itself underground is almost watertight, but let's just try and imagine what this will look like. So this is really a courtyard open space. So you'll see the road over there, and people over here will be able to relax, and this will be part of the entrance. Okay? You'll come in through the entrance here, and you'll have an open foyer, which is it's similar to a courtyard idea where people can gather together. But at the same time, the idea is this is a central location where on the left-hand side you'll have a restaurant, and you have a little coffee area behind, and right in the back there you have a garden over there, and then what you'll have is something called a ghusl room. So this is when people pass away, when they want to be washed, there's a room at the back where that can happen. Over here, and this is really the prayer area, and you obviously will have the ability for people to wash themselves before they enter on the side, and you have coat areas and stuff. But the main area is here. This is really going to be a feature room, and hopefully, it really is going to try and change the way you think about prayer. It can hold about 300 people without a problem, and the idea is this is going to be a serene, different area, and people from who are coming in will be able to see this. And we think that's really important. We think the prayer is an important part of our faith, but it's also something we think is very inviting for others as well. So that's what will happen here. And you can't yet see what will happen above, but the idea is above you can have a mezzanine which will overlook this area. And in that mezzanine area we can have conferences, for example. It's an open area, wedding functions, different places where people come together, as well as different 5 classrooms. And those classrooms are openable, and so they can be made bigger. They can be used for our madrasa program, where people can learn about our faith, where we learn it every week. In addition to those classrooms, there's also going to be a library, and there'll probably be more, an e-library, as well as some books as well, as well as an IT room and a language lab, and an interfaith prayer room. Because we think it's very important that whilst we're bringing people together, whether it's for the conferences or for whatever they're coming together for, there should be a place where people feel comfortable to be able to pray to God in the way that they feel is appropriate. So that's why we have an interfaith prayer room. We obviously have games rooms for young people, and at the top we have admin facilities as well. What's really important to think about here is how we are envisioning this. The idea is this is a place for the family, where all different parts of the family, young and old, men and women, whatever ethnic background, whatever faith you're from, can really participate and really get great value from what we're doing here, because we want to bring people together. For us, it's all about working towards the common good, working towards how we can, be proud in who we are. We are Muslims. We're from a Shia background, and we have no problem with being very, very proud of who we are as Shia Muslims in this country and in this area. But we want to also help be inclusive, and that's what we want to be, confident in who we are, but also very recognizing the diversity of Harrow, because Harrow is one of the most diverse boroughs in the whole of the country. I think it's the second most religiously diverse borough in the whole country. And therefore, in this area, we want to be pioneers in making sure that we can engage and we can be open for everyone. And I think that's probably why we've been able to get the planning permission to make this happen. What we're going to do now is just go downstairs so you can see the scale of what's happening. So this is about an acre side. I forgot to mention on the other side, we obviously will have parking facilities, and on the other side, we have a nursery and a play area where young children can be there. And as you can see, you can start seeing how all the different parts of the family can come together. When we go downstairs, we'll see more. Please do ask questions, as you can see the Zoom chat, and straight after this, we'll be answering your questions. So feel free to ask any questions you have directly. Type it on the chat, or you can ask it directly afterwards. So let's go down. This is still a building site, so it's quite dark in here. Maybe Amar, can you see me?
Just about.
It is a bit dark, isn't it?
I don't think we
All right, what you'll be able to see is the scale of what we've got behind. So if you just pan across, you can see how big this site is and what we're trying to do here. So this main area behind the camera right here is the sports hall. So you can see it's about 6 meters high, it's got space for 4 badminton courts, and obviously this is a great place where people can play and you know, it's another part of the holistic development of people. You know, we care about thinking about the physical, cultural, spiritual, and social elements of our community, and that's why it's really important that we have not just the prayer area, which obviously helps with the spiritual side, but we think that people are holistic. You know, it's not just about one element, and this is the physical part because we think health is obviously very important. And we'll have gyms for both male and women, separate gyms for men and women, which are there. We have the plant area, which is for machinery, over there. We have a studio area, which is, so let's just explain. The studio area is for things like aerobics, table tennis, that type of thing, and that will be at the top over there. And when you put all of these things together, you'll start seeing how people can come for different reasons and all together feel comfortable and open in the space. And then in the top there, you have a kitchen, which is going to be for the restaurant above, but also potentially for catering. On this side, you're likely to have different things like, for example, the beauty room. But you also have over here, we're going to have a staircase, but also coming into here is the idea is going to be we're going to have a lecture theatre. So the idea of a lecture theatre is not just about lectures, really. It's about plays, it's about movies, it's about really trying to invigorate the cultural and artistic side of our communities. Because we have to think about, if you have a state-of-the-art facility which can host plays for our community, people are going to start using it. If you have a state-of-the-art facility where people can watch cultural movies of different types, we will start being able to have people who will take this position and use it and encourage more people to get involved and engage. And I think when we have at the top level, we have a media room as well, which I didn't mention. You know, those are the types of things that start expanding the artistic horizons and culture of our community. And I think that's something that's really important that we lack quite a lot. And if you try and think about it, you know, people come in through this feature staircase with the exhibitions, come in, have some drinks in this area. Everything here will be non-alcoholic because this is our center and we think it's very important to abide by those values that we think are very important. And so they will come here, you know, we'll have some drinks and you know, open and then go into the lecture theatre. And it's a very nice thing to happen in this area in Harrow. So that gives you a bit of an overview of what we try and do in this centre. And, you know, we've gone through a long process. It started off with a planning application, you know, over a decade ago now, which went through a lot of consultation with the local areas. We listened, we changed things. We initially wanted to have a pool. We wanted to have a nursing home, but we scaled a lot of things back because we wanted to think about what everyone wanted in our community and be very open to the feedback that we got. And you know, we had a lot of support from different communities, both in Muslim and wider communities, and our local MPs have been a very big supporter of what we're doing here, as have local councillors. And I think we've been able to take through that process. And now we're at a position where, as you can see, we're in the middle of a building site. We're looking at taking the next step in completing this. It's taken a few years to get to where we've got to. We are a smaller community, but we recognize that we have tens of thousands of Muslims in this area, and you know, 100,000 odd people who live in the Harrow area. And we think this is a place which is open for everybody, and it can be a real beacon in terms of how we can engage with the wider society. Maya, what do you think about it? Are there any things that you find quite interesting that you like about something?
I'm particularly excited about the artistic element. I think in terms of the arts, they've been so underfunded for so long, and actually encouraging things like the arts that the centre will do, that is definitely what I'm excited about, and things that will, you know, bring the Harrow community together. It's exactly what we need at this moment in time.
Perfect, and I think that hopefully, you know, we'll be able to take advantage of the fact that we have, you know, real talented people in our community. We have real talented people in the wider society here, and together, if we're able to raise the funds to make this happen, I hope that we'll be able to listen to you, and all of you will be able to get insight in the future. So we look forward to talking to you soon. So in a couple of minutes, we'll be back on the computer, and we happy to answer any of your questions about what we're doing here, what our facilities, what we've been doing generally at Maflali in terms of our area, what the Salam Center, which is the name of what we're creating here, is trying to do, or any other questions you have about Islam. Look forward to hearing from you and happy to answer your questions. Hi everyone. It would be great, if you have any questions. We obviously wanted to have the chance for anyone to ask them, and hopefully the short, half an hour that we've had gives you an overview of what we've been trying to do all this time. So yeah, any questions from anyone? Please feel free to ask. Just unmute yourself if you can, and then.
Hello there. Hi. More than a question, it was just wanted to introduce myself and congratulate you, all of you, on this impressive vision. I've recently started as an organizer with Harrow Citizens, so I can really imagine how this space could really become a place where young people and just people generally sort of come together, build those strong relationships, and sort of work together to contribute to the local community, which is obviously at the heart of Citizens as well. So just really impressed and wanted to congratulate you all.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think that's exactly right. I think we had been working previously with Paul Muzi before, obviously, you came, and we were actually involved in sort of the founding part of Harrow Citizens, and we used to be much more involved than we have been in the last 6 months to a year, and I think that's partially because of our own, having to try and prioritize the type of work we're trying to do. As you can see, the scale of the project in front of us. I think we need to re-engage much better, and I think that's our fault.
No, I mean, don't say that. There's always opportunities to do that again, but yeah, that's why it's really good timing. I've enjoyed learning more, and let's take the opportunity to reconnect.
Thank you. And I think you came closer to the beginning of the so you saw all the different things that we do, right? And
exactly.
So that's great. Thanks, Daphne. Any other questions? I think I've answered the ones that came on the chat, but anything else from anyone?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Robert. Is that Robert or Julian?
Julian.
Hi, Julian.
Oh, yeah. This is possibly a big question. I'm not sure how easy it is to answer, but I was just interested in what the differences are between, and I love the fact that you're working with all the branches of Islam and Christians and Jewish faith. What are the differences between Sunni, Shia, Alawite strands of Islam? I'm just curious.
Great. That's a really important question. I think it's really good that you asked that, because it's a lot of people have these questions and don't ask them, and I think it's really important that you do. What the differences between the different types are, I guess, at the very, very simplistic approach, it's an idea of who should have been the leader of the Muslim community after the death of the Prophet. So the Shias believe that the right person to take the leadership was appointed by the Prophet himself, and his name was Imam Ali. And the Sunni community believe that actually it should have been a position which Abu Bakr, another individual, should have been the right person to be the caliph, or the leader of the community afterwards. And that's, if you like, where it started. And since then, what's happened is that different approaches have been taken on how you look at the world and how you look at the faith. And whilst I'd say 80 or 90% of the things are exactly the same, like the Quran, which is the holy book, is the same for both Shias and Sunnis. The core roots of the faith and the branches of the faith are different. The idea of importance of praying and fasting and giving charity and enjoining good and forbidding the evil, and belief systems in terms of so, for example, going to pilgrimage to Mecca, all of these core things, a belief in one God, a belief in the prophethood, the fact that they're angels, the fact that they are, that you believe in God's in the day of judgment and heaven and hell. Like, these core beliefs are all the same for both Shias and Sunnis, but there are technical differences. I mean, if you try and think about how do you decide how to be, the best person for God right now? A lot of, there's a lot of thought behind this in theology, right? There's lots of technical questions. When you look at a history or these narrations of what the prophet did during the time of the prophet, how do you learn from that and make sure that you can model yourself in the best way and emulate the best person to have come on the earth, which is the prophet for us? And there are different ways of thinking about these things, and that's how you have different viewpoints on many of these different issues. How do you interpret the Quranic verses, some of which are very clear, some of which aren't so clear in a different context? And these difficulties are ones that scholars look at to try and deal with. But in a pure sense, the difference is a theological one, which is where it started from. But now, those sort of identities have been created, and therefore a lot of the theology about who is the source of truth, if you like, is slightly different. But in practice, 80-90% of the stuff is very, very similar. Does that help?
Sorry, yeah, that does help. And it does, the bit about who took forward the faith is probably the key piece difference, I guess.
That's where it starts.
That, I mean, I've got my heart is with the Syrians at this time, and yeah, thank you for showing us your.
No worries. And look, Syria is obviously a very difficult situation right now. But obviously, people have been massacred. There've been big accusations of terrorism and all this kind of stuff. And how these geopolitical things work, and it's really a disastrous situation where hundreds of thousands of people have been impacted in different ways. Millions of people, in fact, have been impacted, and hundreds of thousands of people have been, have lost their homes and have had to move, and people have been killed. I mean, it's a serious situation. I know I was in Syria over a decade ago now, so long before the crisis, to learn Arabic. So I know some of the areas really well. And when you look back and you see an area where it used to be built up and now is rubble on the floor, when you talk to friends who have really suffered, it's a real you really get the scale of what's happening. But it's a big challenge, and yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I've raised my hand. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks, Sam.
Mikdad, it's Ahmed here. I'm in Preston at the moment. I think we met in 2018 in Manchester. You probably won't remember, but just on the point of what Julian mentioned, as a Muslim of the Sunni faith and following, what I wanted to understand, I may have missed it in your talk earlier, but what is it that is it the Shia community and to some extent the Sunni community? How are they doing that interfaith in terms of that Muslim dialogue? To break their barriers? And my question relates to the recent tragedy of the sad death of Aya Hashim, the Shia girl, 19 years old, who was mowed down in a shooting in Blackburn. And there was these fundraising pages which were propping up for her family and whatnot. But when they found out that she was of the Shia community, these people, these Sunni people, of followers of Muslims, they decided to close it down. Then there was this uproar. You may have followed it on social media yourself and others, but that was quite sad to see and understand. Obviously, you've already touched on that. These certain theological differences and whatnot. But ultimately, we testify the one Kalima Tayyiba. We testify on the fact that Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. So I just want to understand, in that regard. So if you can help with that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
That's a very good question. I think that working with other Muslims of different backgrounds is really important. So just in our local area, I think firstly it's worth talking about local area, and then we can talk more broadly. In our local area, we've engaged very closely with. So we're from a Shia background, obviously. We've been engaging very closely with the Sunni community here, which is the majority in this area as well. So Harrow Mosque has, at Eid prayers in a non-coronavirus time, 5 different sessions, and there are a few thousand people in each session. It shows you're looking at 10,000 people coming in to pray. I mean, it's a huge mosque and huge attendance. You have the Sri Lankan mosque around the corner as well, which again has a couple of thousand people. So we work very closely with both of those Sunni institutions, as well as some of the smaller ones as well. I think the most powerful example, which I think we gave in the talk, but you may have missed it, is the Sunni Harrow Mosque, which is obviously one of the biggest mosque in Harrow by a long shot. They were rebuilding their site only a few years ago, and even before they rebuilt their site, the site they had was too small, and so they didn't have sufficient place for Friday prayers for Jummah. So they used our center for Jummah, and we just chose not to have Jummah, and it was led by a Sunni Imam from Harrow Mosque for 13 or 14 years. Every Friday, for free, our mosque was used for a Sunni Jummah, or for Sunni Jummah, Friday prayers. And I mean, and there were like 500, 600 people coming every week to our center, which obviously is at least at that time was still much smaller. So I think that shows that there is, very strong engagement at our local level where we're working so closely in that way. We also created something called the Muslim Forum of Middlesex, where we tried to make sure that the mosques in the area could work together. If there were issues that we needed to talk to council or others about, which were related to Muslims, how can we do that in a way that works together? So we have that. I mean, that's relatively, it works a little bit, but, there's a lot of work to do to strengthen that. On a more broader scale, which I think is the core of your question after Ayah Hashim's passing, death, and what happened on the back of that. So just for background, for those who don't know, Ayah Hashim was a young girl. She got killed in what seemed to be a racist attack, but then actually ended up being, I think she was just accidentally killed. There were other people who were shooting, and she was killed. But I think there was a lot of, and this was during the month of Ramadan. I think it was during the month of Ramadan. And so a lot of people were very sad and very saddened to see a young girl just killed by accident in that way. And people were very worried about that. And then it was later found out she came from a Shia background. And some people, a small minority, to be fair, but still not a non-zero group. There were people there who, because she was Shia, didn't want to give money, wanted to get their money back because they had given some money to a fundraising page, stopped a fundraising page, and all this kind of thing that happened. My hope is that these are still isolated incidents. My hope is still that these aren't, this is not really necessarily reflective of Muslims generally, I don't think at all. And look, this Visit My Mosque, this virtual Visit My Mosque Day is organized by the Muslim Council of Britain, which is a Muslim body, not a Shia body, not a Sunni body, and which has Shias and Sunnis at all levels of the organization, from decision makers at the leadership level to spokespeople to mosques which are affiliates. Like, we're a Shia mosque, but we're part of the Muslim Council of Britain. I'm a spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain, and I'm a Shia background. So there are lots. I think it's really important that the end goal is not about removing one's identity or just ignoring the fact that I'm a Shia, I come from a Shia background. It's not about removing that, but it's about being comfortable in your identity and in the situations you're in. And I think that places like the Muslim Council of Britain have done a very good job in making that possible by from the top, in terms of decision making, to all of the different bodies and different organizations and different national council, etc., are all reflective of our society. And I think what we need to do much better is ensure in each area, different councils of mosques, different groupings, really do reach out, because it's very easy for one to make friends with someone who's very similar to you, a Shia making friends with other Shias, or a Sunni making friends with Sunni, or an Asian making a friend with an Asian, or a Christian with a Christian. That's easier to do. The hardest thing is to reach out, to realize, and to not just tolerate difference, but respect difference, and work extra hard. And it is extra hard to engage with those who are different, because it's not necessarily as comfortable sometimes. It does require, a lot of empathy and understanding of the other, in a way that, it's not easy. And we always try our best to do that. For example, with the local church, so we have, every couple of months we do this, as I mentioned earlier, we do this thing where we talk about the Bible and the Quran, and we do that every couple of months. But that's one where we learned a lot how to engage with one another through that process, because sometimes there were things like, oh, we should pray, but we can't pray together because we pray very differently, and how do we do these difficult things? And the same thing happens with Shias and Sunnis. From a Sunni perspective, if there's for example, you'll know this better than perhaps everyone else from a Sunni background. You may not say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in Jama'ah, but we do. Or say Allahu Akbar in certain places, whereas the Shia community do. And there's the Qunut, where you raise your hands up in the air on the second second rak'ah of prayer, which Sunnis don't do. So all of these things, how do you deal with that? Or when you have an intrafaith iftar, Shias generally break the fast a bit later than Sunnis. So how do you make sure that all of these things are catered for? And I think that it's about experience. It's about doing more of these things, and the more the better we get at it.
Yeah, and it's just these little intricacies of common understanding, which I think leads to the common downfall. So these sectarianism, call it that. I think you get it within the Christian community, Protestant, Catholics, and whatnot. And unfortunately, we face this within the Muslim community. So it was just to understand, and I might be the odd one out here calling in from the Northwest, but I also volunteer at the local masajids, for the Visit My Mosque initiative. I was looking to volunteer tomorrow if coronavirus wasn't there. And I have good contact with your colleague, Hassan Judy at the MCB. So Jazakallah for that, Victor. Thank you.
Thanks, Ahmad. Any other questions?
I've got a question I'd like to ask about the reading from the Quran. And it's a technical question, but I think it might give an insight for us on sort of how you operate. How was the sort of passage chosen? Is it part of a systematic reading through of the Quran, or was it just chosen for this event?
That's a very good question. I think so. The way that those are chosen is actually those are the same verses we chose last year, and we do that every year. So we like these verses. I mean, the way that the Quran is slightly different to the way the Bible works, in the sense that it's not a lot of the verses. You need to sometimes understand some of the context. It makes it more difficult if you don't have that context or that background or understanding. What we tried to do is chose verses which were simple to understand in and of themselves, ones that reflected the specific principles that we thought were really interesting and important to talk about, and that's why we chose those verses. And so, the idea of justice, for example, doing justice even if it is to your own family, the idea of making sure that when people are fighting, you always try and make it up between them, and if they don't, then you try and support the oppressed. Basic principles that most of us would agree on. These are really fundamental in our faith. I think there was one of the verses was Surah Hujurat, that's the 49th chapter of the Quran, and it was talking about how God has created people in tribes, basically different people, so that you may get to know one another. And the best of you is those the one who is conscious of their obligations towards God and engaging with one another. And I think these are really core principles for us. And I think that hopefully helps reflect who we are, because these are the verses of the Quran that that are really important. So they were chosen for this event.
but they're the same verses that we chose last year and the year before and the year before that as well, actually, because we think these work really nicely for this. They're quite simple. They're quite understandable to an audience who perhaps may not have be that aware of certain verses of the Quran, and it just helps put things together. But any passage could be chosen, but sometimes some of them are more complicated, and again, those are fine too, because as long as there is a commentary to make sure that people don't misunderstand what's going on. And we thought it's nice to choose simple ones that are principles based, that show who we are as a community. Is that okay, Rob?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Anyone else, or anyone have any other questions?
If there's no one else, I might ask a second question. Just interested in, when you set out to sort of kind of shape this vision for a mosque that is, a mosque and arguably maybe so much more in terms of lectures and community services and so on. How common or uncommon is that? And would you almost say, is this likely to be the direction for sort of future generations? Is this, are we looking at like the mosque, the masjid of the future in a way in Britain? Did you have that sense that you're doing something new, or were there examples that you drew from other communities, maybe in other Muslim communities in the country?
Are you talking more about the future project or the work we're currently doing, or a mixture of both, I guess?
I guess a bit of both, yeah.
I think that some of the stuff we're doing is quite special. I always try and hope that's the case. We try and be a bit innovative. We try. That's not always the case, but we try our best. I don't know. I think that a lot of this stuff, though, is done by other mosques across the country. I think most perhaps might be, very focused on ensuring that the core, prayers and learning about Islam are delivered, because that's really hard, actually, right? I mean, most mosques, are run voluntarily or struggle to have people with struggle to have to answer all the needs of the community, because the community's needs are sometimes huge. I mean, if you have a few thousand people, and some people have special needs and some people have other issues, and you want to try and teach them about Islam and have a madrasa for the young kids, so they learn about the faith from a young age, and then you want to make sure that all the core events of the year are appropriately marked, and you have daily prayers, and you have food during the month of Ramadan and other things. Just being able to manage that is such a huge task. So I think that mosques that are able to even do that well are almost, hats off to everyone who's able to do that. I mean, especially right now, you've obviously got coronavirus right now, where all of these things can't even happen in a normal way. So mosques have had to learn how to do Zoom chat, things like this. This is being streamed live onto YouTube at this very moment. As Julian actually just mentioned on the chat, this is happening for churches as well. But I mean, it's really, doing the core is very difficult. And I think that sometimes we fail on the core. We're not perfect. We obviously make mistakes, and we can't do things perfectly. And we learn from one another to make sure that we can do the core very well. I think that in the next generation, the younger generation, the core is one part of them, but many want more. And I think that I think you might have seen at the beginning that our community, it was a journey. It started off very insular in our nature. Even being insular, there was this, everyone was born abroad who started the mosque. Now, most of the people who run the mosque were born here. And there are consequences for that in terms of what priorities are taken, and how to best be comfortable and confident in our core identity, but also recognize how important it is to make sure that our communities around us know who we are, and we're able to engage much better. And I think that work is definitely, only in the last 10 years where we've really stepped that up. But it's not easy, and it's a lot of work in a voluntary capacity when everyone's sort of very stretched anyway, and struggling to do and then trying to run a mosque, which is in and of itself a core activity, which is voluntary again, and then trying to do this other stuff also in a voluntary capacity. So there are many mosques who've done fantastic work because they've also been able to hire people. So they raise money and then hire people to be able to run some of the core events, and then can do much more. So I think there's definitely a professionalization element which is happening in many mosques. And you know what? If there's so many mosques doing fantastic work. If you look at East London Mosque, for example, the amount of outreach they do there, it's just astonishingly large. So there are many mosques which do really, really good, interesting, different things. I think possibly the only thing that we do, which perhaps is a bit more unique, is every single Friday we have a very, very varied lecture on a completely different topic related to Muslims, which is perhaps not seen in that way, at least in other places. But you know, put that aside, most of the stuff we're doing in terms of outreach is very, very normal, I think, in many mosques across the country. And that's why, you know, this Visit My Mosque Day, in the non-coronavirus time, 250 mosques in the country opened their doors, you know, to the wider society. I mean, it shows how, and this is from every part of the country. And so when you have that happening, it shows, you know, how much mosques are already building themselves to be able to engage with the wider society. For some people, that's their main way of engaging through the Visit My Mosque scheme. For others, that's one pillar of a larger group of things that will be done. So I think it just depends. I'd like to think we're quite unique and special, but I think in reality, a lot of what we do is done by others. The one thing I would add, though, is in the Salam Center, though, in the future, I think that is quite unique in the sense that because it's a holistic development in terms of sports, like looking at sports, looking at health, looking at culture, looking at, you know, media, looking at all these different elements, I think that's quite special. I think that, you know, other big mosques do have elements of that, like do have gyms and other things, but I think this perhaps is quite unique and special compared to some, I think even most mosques in this country. So I think that's possibly the next level and the next step, because it's a naturally open space. Because if someone lives in the area and they want to go to their gym or they want to go to a sports hall, they may just go to this sports hall, not because it's the Salam Center or a Muslim organization or anything. They might just go there. And I think that's the shift that we're trying to do, because at the moment still, you know, people come to our mosque when we invite people to come to our mosque. What we're hoping is by the Salam Center, people will just go because it's got a lecture theatre or it's got something that they're interested in. It's a community center where people just want to be there anyway. And I think that shift, I think, is quite special. Well, that's what we're hoping, and I guess we'll see how that manifests itself in the future.
Amazing, thanks.
Julian just asked a question on the chat. I'll just answer it directly. Are the Friday events broadcast? They are. So they're broadcast on the same channel, and I will send you a link on there just so you can have it. It's on this youtube.com/user/second-tv/live. And what you'll see is the programs are on our website. So let me try and share that with you. That's our website, sikkim.org.uk. So next, so for example, this coming Friday, we have someone called Dr. Fozia Bora. She's talking about who wrote Islamic history books and why. So it's a very different topic. Last week was Palestine, what can we do now? The week before was hijab fashion, empowerment and Islamophobia. In 2 weeks' time, we have Kashmir. The week after, we have Islam and slavery. The week after, we have modest fashion, commerce, community, or controversy. I mean, there are lots of these types of very different things, all led by, you know, experts. You know, the last one's done by Professor Rainer Lewis. The one before is by Professor Clarence Smith. You know, these are experts in their topic who we've invited in. So they're every Friday. They're open to everybody at any time, both live in person when we end up being back in person, but it's broadcast live on our YouTube channel at 8:30 p.m. every Friday, and that will continue for and has been there for the last 20-30 years, I think, and is likely to continue.
That's really great to hear. People are open to all sorts of information nowadays, and need to understand. So you broadcasting those sessions is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we do try and keep them recorded online as well. So even if you miss one or two, you'll be able to find them online on our YouTube channel. And that, you know, some people actually say they don't want theirs to be online, so that is a bit unfortunate. So we have a certain number which just are only broadcast live and not kept for later. But most people are very comfortable with their with it being recorded and shared online. So yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Sorry, Peter just joined. But any other questions before?
Come on, there's lots of other people here.
There are lots of other people, but anyone, please feel free to ask. And even if you've already asked one before, feel free to ask again. That's not a problem. We do have a little bit of time if they're there. Oh, is there a question on the YouTube channel? Just make sure. From Mahmoud Tova? No, that's in the chat. Okay. Final chance. Okay. Thank you all very much. Obviously, feel free at any time to join, to ask questions, to if you have any questions, we're on info@sikkim.org.uk, or you can go to our website, which I shared earlier, www.sikkim.org.uk. We have our regular programs at any time. Again, feel free to join. Our stuff is very open. We do want to try and be as open as we can. And, you know, hopefully next year will be the next step closer to the Islam Center being built. In 2 or 3 years' time, will be fully done. That's it really from my side. Thank you all very much for coming and share, you know, your Friday, your Saturday afternoon and spending an hour and a half or an hour and a bit with us. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for organising this.
Thank you.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. We hope to see you in the flesh one day.
Look forward to it. Look forward to it.